Today we'll tell you a little bit about what we're thinking. I will cover a little bit of the overall landscape as we look at kind of the significant market-driven, technology-driven changes coming our way. And after that, I have colleagues, Ryan Baxter, Mel Humphreys, Roger Peen, and Naga Chandrasekharan, who will go into much more detail on how we are building out the road to that future. We'd love your questions. We'd love the debate. We'd love to learn as well. It's not just a one-way effort for us here. So let's get started. My name is Raj Hazra. I've been in Micron for about a year now. I have the privilege of managing the Compute and Networking Business Unit at Micron, and sitting kind of at the cusp of this opening statement, which is really more of an opening question for us as a company, but the industry as a whole. Data, is it a blessing or a curse? Today, what we hope to tell you is that even though words like deluge, drowning in data, all of those have been used, we see this as a tremendous blessing. We see this as a tremendous opportunity. We see this as powering the next phase of the digital age. And we want to talk to you about how we see that coming up through, and most importantly, how we, Micron, are contributing, driving, and then making that future happen. So with that, let's kind of move forward. First is a safe harbor statement. And I promise you there will not be a quiz at the end, but I would ask you to read this as quickly as you can. It has the usual statements around forward-looking statements regarding future events and contain important factors that could cause actual results for the company to differ. And these are expectations, but the key phrase is at the bottom. Data is provided as is. And it's a wonderful segue, I think, to the topic of what I want to frame as our discussion over the next couple of hours. Is data a blessing or a curse? If you look at the chart on the right, and this is data from IDC Global Data Sphere, the recently released 2021 report, it shows a fairly aggressive rate of growth. To some, that's aggressive. To some, that's underwhelming. And in fact, this is perhaps a hotly debated topic in itself. How quickly will data grow? And we can debate that, with the onset of IoT or machine to machine, who really knows how fast data will grow? Whether it's transient data or permanent data or some combination of those, the estimates vary from, by orders of magnitude. But what is really key is what's at the bottom of that chart, is how much of that data is actually being tapped for insight. And that one number is the quotient to answering the question, is it a blessing or a curse? So what we hope to do is look at turning that data, which is kind of like potential energy, into displacement, which is insight that drives value, right? And what we want to look at is what are the things that are going to be needed as we move forward in order to increase, as the data volume increases, the conversion of data to insight. If you look at the data economy, it is being driven on insight, and increasingly so. And while this sounds like a grandiose statement, and you can have everything from national governments investing in data policies to companies undergoing digital transformation, there are too many examples to give to instantiate this point, and perhaps those examples are not necessary. For us, it's personal. At Micron, we are living the statement. The data economy is driven on insight. Our business is driven on insight. And we are finding ways every day to use data in ways we never used before. Of course, there is the data that drives our business operations. There is then data that drives our manufacturing and R&D operations in ways that we couldn't have imagined before a few years ago. Who would imagine that sensors planted all around the factory are simply listening to the ambient noise and detecting from patterns of anomalous noise that there are some things unusual going on in the equipment set in the factory? We're down to that level of understanding of data and the understanding of how to use that data. And that's just one of many, many examples where data is literally driving our business forward. I hope we can have some interesting examples in this dialogue of how you see that happen as well, as it informs us completely and informs us in total of our opportunities going forward. But that pursuit of insight is essentially redefining the platform. What we see is this explosive data growth combined with tremendous algorithm innovation and an infrastructure revolution that is allowing, in a cost-effective and performant way, those algorithm innovations to use the data and eventually make that insight happen at an unprecedented level of progress than we've ever seen in the industry. There are lots of debates, and depending on whether you're a hardware person or a software algorithm person or you're the chief data officer of a company, you could have lots of interesting and somewhat philosophical discussions about which one is driving what. But we can debate that, but there is no debate about the fact that they are working in concert. Algorithms existed many, many years ago. Those have become useful, and they have become more powerful with the growth of data that allows those algorithms to increase both in effectiveness and computational value. I'm talking particularly about the area of machine learning and AI, where more and more data has led to more sophistication of models, increased sophistication of models has led to higher levels of insight being drawn from them. Yet none of those two things could have happened with infrastructure, with growth in compute, with growth in storage and memory, both performance and capacity, that has powered and matched the human mind and the data explosion, the ingenuity of the human mind to actually turn it into useful computations, and therefore provide that same human mind with the input to drive insights for value. And we'll certainly talk a little bit in detail about the infrastructure piece, certainly in Ryan's, but throughout in Mal and Roger's work as well. The infrastructure is not just about the platform. It goes all the way down to the basic core technologies in silicon and scaled volume manufacturing of that makes this infrastructure not just performant in one instance or two, but really democratize and be able to use all around at scale. And we'll talk about that particularly in Naga's section. The one thing that I want to leave you with as we look at having this discussion for the rest of the 2 hours is you'd ask, for those, as Stephen said, we are not a new name, but the Micron we knew was a memory and storage company. And largely that is true, but it is not the Micron that was 10 years ago. In a particular way, and I hope this is what we have a chance to discuss with you and get your feedback on, is you'll see we are risk takers. We are taking risks at the level of technology, in manufacturing, in architecture, in driving ecosystems without just waiting for them to happen and taking advantage of them. We are innovating on multiple vectors. We are customer focused, not just in the traditional way of delighting your customers, but we're customer focused in a way of partnering with them in order to solve problems that they themselves don't have a very clear idea of today. So going from serving the customer to working with the customer to define their future for them in an unprecedented collaborative way, not just within the company to make these capabilities come to market, but within the ecosystem, our customer base, our partner base, our supply chain base. And nowhere, and at no time has that become more important than it is over the last year and a half, as the pandemic has certainly driven in the sense of a crisis that should not go to waste. And we have innovated across many, many of those constraints to discover new ways of doing business. So I hope you see in what we talked to you about today is a bold vision for the future and compelling vision of the future, an exciting vision and bold steps that we are undertaking in our manufacturing, in our technology, in our products to get there.
You're talking about, you are not the company that we know about. I mean, and as far as I know, I know you as a component vendor, and this idea to become more visible, more partner driven is very compelling. But strategy is everything in this aspect. I mean, you mentioned, yes, partner, you mentioned the supply chain, you mentioned, but actually what I see also from other vendors is that this strategy is very, very difficult. I mean, is there any, I don't know, best practice to use your technology that you're implementing? Is there anything that shows to the real end user? I'm not talking about partners like big storage vendors or big server vendors. I'm talking about the end user, the enterprise. So how can you stand out with this type of customers today?
That's an excellent question, Enrico, and I will answer it in brief. And then hopefully throughout the presentations later today, particularly in Ryan and Mal and Roger's section, what you will see is a sea change in the way we think of products to begin with. We think of products with the end user and the end usage in mind, in many cases working directly with the end users to bring these capabilities to market, to envision them. And as particularly as we talk about how the memory hierarchy is extending and how the storage and memory hierarchies are converging, what you will find is this is no longer just the world of fine standards where we have to build great products compliant to a standard. These are areas where we are pioneering a change in the architecture of systems, not just at the hardware level, but the software infrastructure as well. And what you will see is risk-taking to say, are these the future usage models that we should enable today with the products that we build into that architectural framework? So don't forget that question. Ask us that again at the end of these 2 hours if you haven't seen through some very specific examples where it is no longer, in some sense, supplying a product that others do have, but it's starting at the very left end of that process of envisaging what those product sets, that portfolio of products needs to be. And doing that, working very explicitly with the end customers to understand their pain points, their constraints of deploying these products.
Okay.
And that's a great segue into why at this moment are we having this conversation. It's not just the opportunity that our customers and end users present, whether it's in the enterprise and the cloud or the changing landscape of working from home or studying from home or the 5G infrastructure that's driving a sea change in what used to be custom hardware to a much more industry standard cloud-like server, cloud-like infrastructure, is we have the technology leadership. I know Naga will go into it, and you've seen some examples of that in our 1-alpha, in our NAND portfolio products. We have the right portfolio of products, and this is very important. It's not just about we have DDR4, we'll have DDR5, we have DDR3, we have NVMe SSDs, and we have SATA SSDs. This is about a portfolio of products that can address workloads and workflows working together. And that's what we mean by the right portfolio. And then we have broad partnerships in place now to drive at the leading edge of this versus the harvesting trail of it. And again, we will talk to you a lot through Ryan, Mal, and Roger's section on this, with specific examples as it applies to systems, whether it's in the enterprise and cloud or on the client side. So we believe that this is what's necessary for success for us. We believe this is what our customers and end users are asking us to do. And we believe we have the technology, the portfolio, and partnerships to execute to this moment. So without much more of a setup, I'm simply going to introduce the folks that are going to take us through this journey over the next now an hour and 40 minutes or so. Ryan's going to talk to us about kind of the data-centric workloads in the future data center. As we see the data center of the future and the workloads running there, how do we see the fundamental architectures changing? And what do we need to do? And what we will have is a robust conversation around old paradigms that need to give way to new paradigms, and how to be successful in those paradigms for our customers. Mal and Roger will walk us through, as I said, kind of what we talk about is the roadmap, is not just our roadmap of products, but kind of the capability roadmap that the industry is looking at as it, deals with this insatiable need for data and the need to move the data, store the data, and eventually, make insight out of that data. And then Naga is going to end with a comprehensive view of what we would call the underpinnings of being able to do all of this. With our silicon technology and manufacturing and the innovations that drive costs down, more performance, drive power and energy efficiency in our products. And you will see how important it is that all of these three things being in one company are in order to drive this future to fruition.